With the recent redesign of the giant Anthem for 2022, I thought it was about time I addressed a question that a lot of new riders come to me with. What exactly is the difference between the Anthem and the Trance? Hi, my name is Cam, and I think I am wearing my wife's t-shirt. This might be a girl's shirt. Do you like my farmer's tan? I mean, that's how you know I ride bicycles. To someone well seasoned in the world of mountain biking, this answer may seem pretty obvious, but to someone just getting into the sport, the amount of different styles of mountain bikes can be a little overwhelming. You've got your hardtails, your XC race bikes, your hardtail trail bikes, your dirt jumps, your XC full squishies, your trail bikes, your enduros, downhills, mullet bikes, you get the idea. There's a lot of options out there. Today, at least, we are just going to be comparing two of Giant's most popular steeds. That is none other than the Anthem and the Trance X. I chose the Trance X over the standard Trance because it's what is available. It's what I could get. It's what I could get my hands on, and I want to show you guys comparison between the two bikes real world. I don't want to just like stick up like a picture of a Trance that I want to compare. And I tried to pick two bikes that were relatively comparable in price point. I got close-ish. We'll get to all that. So today we are going to be taking a look at the Anthem Advanced Pro 29.3 and the Trance X Advanced Pro 29.3. Now there's about 300 There's about 300 differences. I can't talk today. What is wrong with me? There is $300 between the two bicycles. The Anthem is about $4,600 in the US, and the Trance X is $4,300. Yeah, it's not really the focus of this video. The video is more or less which style of bike would you like to choose. So let's talk about what actually separates these two full suspension bicycles. They both have a one-by, they both have a dropper, both are carbon frames, so how would you actually decide between these two mountain bikes? I always tell somebody that you need to look at what you are going to use the bike for 90% of the time and choose a bike that meets those demands. But first we need to talk about what actually does separate the bikes, namely geometry and suspension design. So first, let's talk about suspension design, as that is what predominantly separates these two bikes. The Anthem has what Giant calls a flex point suspension design, which is just their verbiage for a single pivot bike. Just about every single company has a short travel XC bike that uses this design. Just take my Orbea Ois that I race, for instance, it's the same thing. Flex Point Pro, or single pivot, essentially makes the rear wheel travel in an arc instead of straight up and down. The entire rear end of the bike moves around a single pivot point. Are you catching on now? For an XC race rig, this is a great design because it is super stiff, lightweight, and has minimal pedal bob. Now, where it gets a little bit lackluster is on some of the gnarlier trails because the suspension isn't as good at tracking as the more robust Maestro design that is on the Trance. This is why if I were to ever see a 150 plus travel bike that has a single pivot design, I'd be a little bit leery of it. Now, what the Anthem is great at is pedaling. This thing is lightweight and stiff, so if you were doing like an hour and a half XC Hammerfest, this is the bike you're going to want to go with. Or like the race I just completed, Woods Mountain, it does have a couple chunky sections, but it has a crap ton of gravel access roads, and this bike, or even a hardtail, would be a better option than something like the Trance X for that race. Because essentially what you're going to lose on the descents, you are going to gain back tenfold in the more pedally portions of the race. So the Anthem, it's single pivot. Now let's talk about Maestro suspension, which is what the Trance X has. Now, if you're looking at the Anthem, and it's got 100 millimeters of travel in the rear end, and it has a 110 fork on the front. And the Trance X is a 150 up front and 135 millimeters of rear travel. The Trance X also has a flip chip, which is pretty nice. But when it comes to the suspension design, Maestro, if you take a look at it, the biggest difference is with Maestro, you have a top rocker and a bottom rocker. This essentially lets the rear end of the bike move in a much more vertical direction. It's got a little kink towards the bike right at the top of the travel, but not very much. The rear end of this bike, for the most part, travels in a straight line, up and down. Much more efficient. It tracks super well. I was almost just completely devastated and disappointed when they took Maestro off of the Anthem and made it a single pivot bike, because in my opinion, having Maestro on an XC bike, although slightly heavier, made it at least unique in the world of XC race bikes, and boy does it track really good. Think about like your Orbea Occam. People love the Occam. Think about that suspension design if they could make it lightweight and put it on an XC Ois. That's essentially what the Anthem was. Now the Anthem is just a standard single pivot bike. So with Maestro, they run that on downhill bikes. Like the Glory has a Maestro suspension design, so it is very good in the chunky downhill stuff. The only downfall of Maestro, it is heavier, and in the scheme of things, it technically has a little bit more pedal bob. I almost don't want to claim that it has a little bit of pedal bob, because whenever I rode an Anthem, not a Trance, that had the Maestro suspension on it, I could not tell the pedal bob. Like, the way that suspension design is supposed to work is you're supposed to sit in the travel, and the travel is supposed to be completely working the entire time you're riding the bike, so you don't notice pedal bob, if there is that much. Now on a flex point or single pivot bike, essentially it's going to feel like the rear end is locked out until you start hitting something that makes the rear end flex a little bit, and when it flexes, that unlocks the suspension essentially, and it starts to maneuver up and down. That's why flex point is so good for cross country, because it's essentially locked out until you start hitting the rough stuff. Getting back to it, the Maestro suspension design as a suspension design is superior. It's just heavier. It's got more pivots. Of course, it's not going to be as stiff. Those things are very minuscule. Now, when you get to geometry, the Trance X definitely has a slacker head tube angle and a slacker seat tube angle. So this is better for your high-speed descents, but the slacker the head tube, the slacker the seat tube, the worse the bike is in tight, twisty, low-speed things. So if you take a trail like Post and Park, besides the stuff that's on the mountain that's kind of downhilly, not counting that, but like the first section of Post and Park, I know most of you guys listening to me have never even ridden there. It's a tight trail, it's old school, it's hand cut. You come to a turn and it's just, like, it's a lot of that. It's super fun though. You really need an XC bike for that kind of stuff, because when you get to a bigger bike with that slack head tube angle, you kind of have to manhandle the bike around some of those turns, whereas like the Anthem, you don't, you just turn, because that's what it's made for. Let's summarize it up. Why would you choose an Anthem? Why would you choose something like a Trance X? Or even a Trance for that matter? If all you're gonna do 90% of the time is ride your local trails, if you live in the mountains, disregard me calling them local trails, but you know, the descents out at like the Whitewater Center, if you've ever been there, the descents out there are 20 seconds. At best. You can haul butt during that 20 seconds, but it's a lot of cross country, what I would define as cross country trails. When places around here say it's a Black Diamond trail, to me that is almost a green trail when you go somewhere like Wilson's Creek. Nothing out at Whitewater Center is hard. Nothing at any of the local trails is really that difficult, and it's very pedal based. And if you're averaging 14 miles an hour through the woods, you are hauling butt, but most of the trails are most of the local trails, you average anywhere from like 10 to 14 miles an hour. And if you're doing that, the Anthem is going to be a better option. If you're racing your local XC races or short track races, stuff like that, the Anthem is a better option. It's going to pedal way better, and it's going to be a lighter bike, and it's going to corner slightly better on the slower speed courses. Now, where the Trance is better is for those longer all-day epics and for descents. If you're going to the Pisgah Mountain Range, I would say twice a month, I would probably just go ahead and get that Trance, because it doesn't feel that bad to pedal the Trance at your local trails, but it's not as good as the Anthem. But if you're gonna get up to the mountains and that's what you love to do, like for me, I do a lot of racing, I'm going to pick a bike that is going to help me more in the race scenario. But the Trance X, it pedals great, you can take it to the mountains, and when you descend on something like that, it feels so much more robust it doesn't feel like you're on something that's gonna break. That's the easiest way I can describe it. It instills a lot of confidence in you when you're riding something like the Trance X, whereas the Anthem, it can handle everything up at Wilson's. I have taken my 100mm travel Oys and rode a lot of stuff up at Wilson's, but the entire time you're kind of gritting your teeth a little bit, squinting your eyes, and you're just like, please God, don't break my bike. And you have to pick lines. Trance X is gonna be much more forgiving. It does a much better job in that chunky stuff. It's going to track way better. You're going to have much more confidence coming down a mountain on something like the Trance X. So again, to reiterate, figure out what you're going to use the bike for 90% of the time. If you don't have any inkling that you want to go to the mountains and ride some of these epic descents and long day rides, then maybe the Trance X isn't for you. You want to stick with something like the Anthem because you're going to feel better. It's going to make you feel stronger because when you put the power down on the Anthem, that freaking bike goes. It's awesome. But if you're the kind of person who your sole goal is to ride locally to stay fit so you can go to the mountains and do those big rides, because guys, if you live in Charlotte and you haven't made it up to the Pisgah area, you're really missing out, because it's one of the best areas to ride a bike in the US, so I'm told. Because I haven't been all over the US, so I'm not gonna act like I know any better. So what have I been riding personally, you ask? I ride an Orbea Oys that I have converted to a 130 in the front and a 120 in the rear. That's kind of a half Anthem, half Trance-ish. You know, if you would like me to do a bike check style video and show you all the different things I have done to my Oys to make it what I hope to be ORAM worthy, let me know. I will definitely show you. I hope this helps you make a decision if you're on the fence between the Anthem and the Trance. More travel isn't always better. Lighter isn't always better. That's what I got for you. If you have any questions, please let me know. So if you find this content in the least bit interesting and you enjoy my channel, please feel free to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think the difference between the two bikes are. Let me know if I missed something, because I'm by all means not perfect whatsoever, and I'm going to miss some things. This is just my general knowledge from being in the bike industry for 15 years maybe. Sounds about right.